I live right next to a Navajo reservation and have made friends with many of the people there my age. We like to hang out, play video games, and just be normal teenagers. I walk over a lot, since my best friend lives a little less than a mile away from me. This isn't exactly a long trek, and usually only takes me about 25 minutes. I've made this trip dozens of times, and have even grown very comfortable with it. I know the people along the way, so I'm not scared or on edge. There is a patch of forest. However, about midway there, it's a little unnerving sometimes. There is always that feeling of being watched. This was a regular occurrence for me, so I try to just ignore it and shake it off as my mind just playing tricks on me. This day, I spent more time at my friend's house than I'd meant to, and when I left, it was already getting dark. I reached the stretch of forest right as the sun disappeared from the sky. I shivered a little as I readied myself to begin the journey through. I was 10 steps in when I heard a branch snap. You know the sound, the one that screams that there's definitely somebody or something there with you. I froze, not sure of what I should do next. Should I run? Should I turn around and book it back to my friend's house? I don't know the best option in this situation. I whispered, "Hello?" hearing my voice crack as the words fell from my lips. I don't know why I even opened my mouth, but it was out there, so I listened eagerly for a reply. My heart sank when the answer came back in the sound of my own voice. "Hello?" I began to breathe too fast, my heart pounding against my chest. I felt like I might faint. "Hello?" My voice came again, but not from my mouth. I wanted to run, my feet feeling cemented to the ground. I could not scream, and I could not reply. My voice echoed over and over from a short distance away. I could not pinpoint exactly where it was coming from. It sounded like it was everywhere around me. "Hello, hello." It had repeated. So I screamed to stop, and I finally managed to tear from my lips, when everything around me grew silent. For a long minute, nothing had happened. The air was stale, and I realized then for the first time there were no typical forest sounds. No bugs, no frogs or crickets. Nothing. So I stood there, terrified, waiting to see what would happen next. "Stop it," it mimicked back, whatever it was. I'd had enough and was willing to move my heavy legs. But before I could take a step, I had heard some rustling in the bushes only 20 feet to my left. I watched in horror as a deer head with very large antlers protruded through the brush. As it came further out and stood up on twos like a man, I took off. I flew out of those woods and all the way home in record time. I said nothing to my mother when I got there. I just went up to my room, lay down, and thought about what happened. My mother came in at some point, asked me if everything was all right. I replied yes. I was just really tired. I don't know why I did not tell her. I guess I might have been afraid of how she would react. I called my friend, told him everything. He freaked out and told me that no matter what happened that night, to not reply or look out my window. This terrified me, even more so. He said to call him the next morning, and he would explain more, and that he had to speak to his grandfather as soon as possible. Well, that night, I didn't sleep at all. I stayed awake, listening to every little sound the night brought. Around 3 in the morning, just as I was about to drift off, I noticed the air changed. The night sounds quieted. I felt my heart begin to pound, to feel uneasy. I lay there, waiting, pulling the covers up over my head, like a child, far too scared to move. It came after a long moment again. "Hello," I cried, and it was all I could do. I heard my voice say hello and stop it again. It mocked what I had said in the woods. It was terrifying enough when it copied what I said. But then it did something new. It called my name. "Amy." My mother's voice. "Amy, Amy, come here." "Hello, stop it." My voice again. For the rest of the night, the thing outside my window called my name in my mother's voice and repeated in my voice what I said in the woods, over and over. In the morning, when the sun broke through the dark, it finally ceased. I fell into a fitful sleep. I woke around noon to my friend calling to tell me that he had spoken to his grandfather and could finally explain what happened to me. He said that there was a creature they called a specific name in their native tongue, or simply a skinwalker. He explained that it was an evil witch that used dark magic to transform into an animal with the attributes it required, and that it had, for whatever reason, caught my scent and now knew me. I was also given a warning that since it knew me, it would always follow me, that I would always have to be careful. Last night, I heard scratching on my window and then a low hum. The creature began saying my name again, but also adding in things I hadn't said, in my mother's voice. At one point, it started calling my name, but drawing it out really far. It tried to get me to come outside, or to open the door and let it in my house. This went on nearly all night. At this point, honestly, I feel like I'm going crazy. I don't know what to do. Is it seriously going to stalk the shadows around for the rest of my life? I don't think I can take that. I'm looking for somebody, anybody that can help me. I was just talking to my boyfriend about some weird stuff I saw as a kid. He's a hardcore believer in skinwalkers and won't say it, or even let me say it, after it gets dark, in fear of attracting one. My story starts with coming back from the store with my own family. In my village, an entire new neighborhood was being built. Mind you, I live in an area that used to have a lot of forest around me, which has since now been destroyed due to development and building houses. There was a dirt gravel road in the middle of the woods from the main road that led to a shortcut right to my house. I was maybe 9 or 10 at the time, and I distinctly remember sitting in the middle seat in the middle row of our family minivan, so I got a clear view of the in-between the driver's seat and passenger seat. I was talking with my younger siblings, goofing off, and I looked up to see it crouched on the road. It looked almost exactly like the picture you get when you Google the rake. It had pale gray skin, freakishly slender, and eyes like reflectors. It freaked out and screamed, saying something along the lines of, "What is that?" Both of my parents turned around, asked what I was talking about. So I burst into tears and saw it ran under behind a tree. It was so tall. I see it peek from the tree a couple of times and explain what it looked like to my mom, all while hysterical. My mother, of course, did not believe me at all and got mad at me for trying to scare my siblings. Around that time, I used to watch a lot of those ghosts caught on tape type of stuff on YouTube. I'd show them to my younger siblings, which resulted in many nightmares. My dad, on the other hand, said it was probably just a deer. It looked nothing like a deer. I still remember those eyes. When we passed by the tree, I saw it run behind. Nothing was there. It was completely dark. I thought I must have imagined it, until my dad told me he saw something too when he got home. He told me that he saw something out of the corner of his eye, but did not get a good look since I began screaming and he turned around to look at me. And to this day, it still scares me, and I never walk too close to the woods at night. So, I'm going to keep the details about me brief. I am a Northeastern American from a Norwegian German heritage family, and I am raised very spiritual and have some ghosts of my own. Yeah, I know. Laugh at that statement, but I do have photo and video evidence. Friends, family, exes, roommates, and a girlfriend that has seen and experienced them. My best friend took me to see a shame when I was a teenager, after having some activity. People call the paranormal, and his father's friend, a shame, said that I carry a lot of good energy, and I attract bad energy all the time. Well, in New Orleans, when I went to visit my cousins, I managed to pick up a shadow. So far, things match up. Anyhow, I moved to Arizona, which most people know about the Navajo and other communities. Well, this is actually the first day that I looked, so this is new. Anyhow, last Sunday morning, February 21st, 2021, nearly 2 days ago, me and my girlfriend were in my living room playing a game. Well, we have been noticing my cat Ebby acting weird, staring out the back door all night, fluffing up from time to time, and just glaring at the door. Finally, 4 a.m. rolls around, and Ebby freaks out, cowered in the hallway, hissing and growling. She doesn't make any noise. She doesn't even purr unless she is with me. She only meows when I make sandwiches, because she wants to eat the lunch meat. So when she freaked out like this, it shook me, and Sam were curious and freaked out. I got up to calm her down, and I heard my roommate Andre wake up from the noise. I took a few steps to Ebby, when Sam cried out my name. I looked over to the sliding glass door that sits right behind the couch we were on, and what I saw still has me shook to this moment. Sam was bolting past me when I saw 2 blood-orange eyes staring in from the glass, looking right at me and Sam. Once Sam was out of the room and running down the hallway, the eyes logged on to me. Now, that is mostly all that I saw. I'm not a short or skinny man. I weigh 230, work out, and work in construction part-time for my main job, so I'm not a small guy. But the eyes on this thing stood at least half a head taller than I, maybe 6'4", 6'5". I didn't see much of a body, and what made me run was when the eyes went down to about chest level and moved to the right. I'm a self-defense advocate as well. I have pistols, shotguns, revolvers, hunting rifles, when I go hunting, of course, and my dad's AR. I ignored all of them. Instead, I bolted for the same hallway everybody else has run into, and nearly slammed into Andre, trying to figure out something, and pushed Sam into the bathroom. It has no windows, so I figured safe, and then finally went for my guns. Within seconds, Andre and I each had a gun. We called 911, and were in for the scariest 7 minutes I have ever been in. I barely know anything about these witches, and the only reason why I call them a witch is because I don't reference anything Native American by name. I learned that lesson the hard way, and I have never researched them. But when all three of us are cowered in a half bathroom hearing scratches, knocking, someone running on the roof, banging, and sounds that sounded like knocking on the walls, till it stopped, and we heard wailing from a siren up close. Here is when things get weird. The police, as in more than one, showed up quickly. They said when the officer came to our house, he saw a figure banging on the side of the house before taking off. So he pursued after it, only to find that it dipped down the alley right next to our house. When he pulled his Suburban into the alley, he lost him. The police had us answer questions, investigate the house and such. They left around 6:30-ish a.m. Sam stayed at my place, too scared to go home. Andre called out of work, and I went in later that morning. As I was working, my buddy Ray asked me what happened. I panicked inside and was like, "What?" So I asked him what he meant, and he just told me that you seem messed up. I described to him what happened without naming what I know, and I saw outright. He wanted me to ride home with him. So we go home, and he asked how my herbs are growing when we were in my backyard. I just said they were ready to be picked soon. Why? Well, he didn't say anything, just pointed at the trays that I grow my herbs in, and they're all trashed, picked clean. He only chuckled and said, "You got nothing to fear. He wasn't here for you. He was here for them. One of you must have done something in the past for him to take the knee to scare you all. If we're his targets, it would have been much worse." With that, we walked the house, and he told me to smell the air. He said if I or anyone else was targeted, we would have noticed a rot and decay smell. Then, he found freshly turned soil and dug at it. We found a wad of dried corn husk near where the herbs were, and said that we should leave it. Removing it is bad, but had no ill intentions. He then told me some things that I don't want to write, for the sake of rules. But tonight, I am burning some sage and cedar, and tomorrow I plant more herbs. Specifically, those that it likes, but away from the doors and windows, so we don't get scared by him. Being out in the desert, it's not uncommon to see strange things. Lights in the sky, weird sounds, even beings. And I have an account that is absolutely terrifying to the core. In fact, I'm sure you may not even believe me, but all my friends who were at this bonfire can testify that what we experienced was something of the evil supernatural realm. So let's clear out some details first. We're all about 18-19, and since the pandemic, we've been driven crazy. So on this night, we were looking to go out into the desert and just have some fun, away from being locked in, and our parents, of course. It was a group of about 7 of us. Me, my girlfriend, a buddy of mine, his girlfriend, a couple mutual friends, and one of their family members. And so we drive out to this small area that's not too far from home, build a pretty good bonfire, and, of course, like any 18-year-olds do, bring some booze and some snacks, and get ready to have just a fun night of just letting loose, because we were all getting pretty tired of being stuck inside, for one. This was actually, too, about a year ago. Maybe last June, or maybe last May. It was still right when the pandemic was in the thick of everything. So we got the bonfire going, we're having a good time, cutting up, laughing, and talking. I think none of us had dinner yet, so we were eating some snacks and just talking. We did have beer set aside, but nobody at this point had even drunk yet. And, for whatever reason unknown, my friend's family member, we'll call him Craig, starts talking about skinwalkers, which really creeped all the rest of us out. because the conversation was, I think, about some funny memories or something, and he just starts talking and going on about skinwalkers, something some of us had never even heard about. And then my buddy is like, you shouldn't talk about them, you're going to draw the energy of them here. And even more so being nighttime, all alone in the desert night. They start bickering and arguing back and forth, and then my girlfriend and his girlfriend start to get really creeped out, while the rest of us are trying to tone it down. I mean, the argument or discussion got pretty heated. It ended up with them calling each other a few names and voices rising for sure. But maybe after 5 or so minutes, we're able to calm both of them down and successfully change the topic of conversation. But it doesn't seem like that lasted long, because Craig just shut up altogether and just sat there. Just as I start to feel the good vibes coming back, of everybody smiling and laughing again, we all 7 of us, hear this sound of what appears to be large, multiple animals coming towards us, but staying and circling around the fire, like they were just outside the light of the fire, by, I don't know, a couple car lengths, however many feet that is. And this was maybe 20-some odd minutes after the initial conversation of skinwalkers was started. And we all hear it, and so we all turn around, looking for the source of this noise, and whatever animal or animals are making them. It kind of reminded me personally of a couple of loose cows, except extremely aggressive with the way their footsteps were, but they did not sound bipedal. It was definitely 4 legs, and there was at least 5 or 6 of them, just kept circling us around the fire. We try not to think much of it, like maybe it was just some loose cattle, or maybe horses. There's got to be a reason for it, right? But as time went on, and by time I mean 5-10 minutes, we're trying our best to ignore this, but the noises, all the strange sounds are just getting more and more apparent. Like the hoof sounds, or so it sounded like, the snorting, the hissing, even growling. And not long after, we are all freaking out. So, one of our buddies decided he was going to walk the quarter mile or so back to the car to grab an adequate flashlight and expose these, what he thought were loose steer for what they were. So he starts jogging back the direction of the cars, and not even 2 minutes later, comes sprinting back towards the fire, and we see him running from a distance, and so we're calling out to him, asking, "What's wrong? What happened?" And he runs right up to the fire, and he is pale as a ghost. I had never seen Devin this way. I'll call him Devin for the sake of the story. He was as pale as a sheet, and he looks at us all in the eyes, and his eyes are about as big as a plate, and he keeps saying that he was chased. And we're like, what? What do you mean chased? He said that he got a good look at those things, because 1 or 2 of them broke off from the other few and followed him as he walked towards the car in the night. He said that he kind of saw what it was. He described it as being half man, half reptile, but that it was skeletal looking. And he was all choked up and scared and shaking as he's telling us this. Now, the entire night, multiple of these things continued to circle around us. Maybe, I don't know, if I had to guess, 30 feet beyond the light of the fire. But they would never get closer than that. Even as the fire died down, we'd already planned on being out here most of the night anyway, until the early wee morning hours, so we had plenty of wood. That wasn't the problem. We were just terrified to leave the light of the fire, and the entire night was incredibly fearful, unexpected, and unsure of what was going to happen to us. I think at some point we all decided that we're just going to have to stay within the light of the bonfire until light. We don't have a choice. And I've never in my life felt like I was living in a real Hollywood horror movie. Until this night. And at some point, a huge argument, which turned into a fist fight with Craig and a couple of my buddies, ensued. Because the buddy, not the one that saw this thing and walked to the car, but the other one, flipped out on Craig saying, "You caused this, you brought these things here to us, because you mentioned skinwalkers. And the fist fight ensued. They're fighting, rolling back and forth. We had to break that up. And it seemed like whatever these things were really drawn to the violence. Like it excited them, I guess if you want to call it that. It was very strange. But we were basically forced to stay up all night and keep the fire going until there was just enough light. And as the dawn came, and just enough light peeked over the horizon to expose somewhat beyond the light of the fire, we didn't see anything. So maybe whatever it was knew that the sun was coming up and retreated. Either that or they were very well camouflaged. So we put out the bonfire as soon as we had enough light to run back to the car, and we all bolted. And it's not like we were anywhere special. We'd all just pulled randomly off the side of a road at a spot we all thought would work. And if you had the car, you could look out and see clearly right where a bonfire was. Like I said, you're out here in the desert. It's flat. There ain't nothing to hide behind. And that was the last time we've done a bonfire. I still talk to my friends, but we've not done anything like that since, at least at night. And as a matter of fact, I just tried mentioning this probably about a week ago because the story popped up in my head and I felt like talking to one of my buddies and wanted assurance that that actually happened. He flat out refused to acknowledge that it even happened. I've not spent any time questioning any of my other friends who were there, asking them, what do you think? Did you see the same thing? But I feel like if we had to stand witness for it, we all could, which is why I stand by what I originally did in my opening paragraph. There was more than just me. We all experienced this hell as a group. No matter how terrifying it may have been. Oh, and one last thing I need to include. If you do decide to read this story, which I'm not sure if you will, please leave my real name out of this. Thank you. I'm only 1/4 native, Chickasaw to be specific. My grandfather, who the majority of this story is going to be about, married a white Slovakian woman, and he, of course, was full-blooded Chickasaw. He's got all sorts of terrifying tales of a creature that he saw that he described going from being a man to shapeshifting into this reptile-like thing, or as he called it specifically, the man-dragon, because of how terrifyingly fierce that it looked. It was also extremely violent, to not towards just him, but the tribe itself, and any man that it came across. It was full of bloodlust. He says that the entity, although disguised itself as a man, distinctly still looked different, and tried to blend in with the tribe, but everybody knew what it was, and it was always opted out. On several occasions, it had tried to kill several of his grandfather's siblings and other fellow tribe members back in the day, and at one point, they just stopped seeing it altogether, and that was the end of that. It really makes you wonder exactly what it is they experienced and saw. It got to such an extreme, though, that the tribe, at one point or another, had sent about 3 of their top warriors to go after this thing. They returned unsuccessful and were not able to locate it, but that at nighttime, this creature would slowly find its way within the village and often try and attack several of the tribe's members, if not steal the children and attack the women. Really anybody it could. The tribes knew this thing as some sort of reptilian shapeshifter creature, or the shapeshifter dragon, they often referred to it as, in the Chickasaw native tongue. Because I'm only like 1/4 native, I don't know enough about my own culture to really understand the language that much since it was never spoken to me. Although my grandfather has taught me some of the language. Very small amounts though. My parents, and even he, mostly talks to me in English. I'm just glad I never had to see this thing myself. And I guess other tribes in the entire Oklahoma area and northern Texas also have written and verbal stories passed down of the Dragon Man and how it has the ability to take shape and form of people and can shapeshift at will. Knowing the very limited amount of knowledge I do about my own culture and my own people, Is it possible that this is some sort of skinwalker? Or maybe something else entirely? I don't know. I mean, my people do have a lot of stories about Bigfoot too, and dogmen, puckwudgies, and several other cryptid-like creatures, even flying ones, and ones that live in the water. My people even had lakes that were marked as not safe because of certain beings that lived in them and dwelt at the bottom of the lake. Is it possible that this dragon man surrounded itself in the woods nearby and was just waiting until the right time to strike? Which it probably never got, because my people pursued it endlessly until it just stopped coming around. These are questions I'll probably never have the answer to, and my father doesn't have many answers to them either, or my grandfather, but it's something I look to explore more of, and hopefully come back to you with a lot more terrifying stories. Some of you might find the contents of this story incredibly disturbing, and if you've checked out my Unearthing Stories channel, I've already told a good portion of it, but today, I wanted to tell you the entire story, sent to me from a man named Sam, who recounts his terrifying experiences on an accursed land down in Central Florida. These accounts by the eyewitness are 100% true and factual, and did indeed happen. Without further ado, let's get into the story. This is titled, The Accursed Land. Back when I was 12 years old, my father decided to move us down around the mid-1980s from New York to his land that he had purchased back in the 1970s. About 23 or 24 acres or so of raw, forested land here in Central Florida. My sisters, of course, had all married young and were gone already, and my mother would stay up north, waiting another couple of years for her transfer in an insurance company job, and afterward, planned to rent the house up there out. I have mentioned this to you before, and I explained that my father was very loving and affectionate to me. Often, after he came home from trucking over the road, he brought me gifts and toys and such. He loved me very much, since I was his only boy, and he had prayed for a son for many years, and finally, I came along, 7 years after the last daughter. His little last of the Mohicans, he called me. But after this Ouija board incident, as I talked to you about before, he became a very mean and abusive man. After my sisters had moved out, things seemed to die down a bit, and my mother and father seemed to get along better than ever, or at least shortly after the last sister moved. Things seemed to change once we got out to Florida. I was excited to go, since Florida was a well-known tourist tropical state, with many things to go do and see, like fishing and the beaches and Disney World and such. When we moved, everything seemed okay at first. We got along fine, and we moved into a used single-wide manufactured home that he had set up already. But in the future, he planned to build a bigger home and move that one towards the back of the property and rent it out. There was tons of work to do after we got there to tame the land. I spent every extra hour I had besides school, church, or sleep to work that land, and I was the primary muscle to do a lot of things since my father had had a bad back from unloading and fixing his trucks for many years. I'd say 6 months after we were there, things changed. I felt a heaviness in the air that was overly suffocating. I thought it might be the heat, but even in the cooler months like December and January, it always felt that way on the property. I experienced sleep paralysis often, even though that never happened to me up north, and nightmares. A few times, some type of force held me face down in the bed. Other times when I was asleep, I'd wake up in a panic and see something very dark and shadowy like in the corner of my room. My father's demeanor changed. He became very mean and cruel. He stopped going to church and I had to get rides from a nice family to get there on Sundays. We eventually started an animal farm. Initially, everything seemed alright, but not long after, the animals began dying in very gross and painful ways. Horrific ways. Especially to a teen from up north who was green and had no experience with this. It seemed like all I did for years was bust my tail, clearing up trees he had cut down, and dodging coral and rattlesnakes while I did it, or burying animals in the back property that had died in all kinds of sick ways. Our chickens, even though we fed them very well, would constantly fight, kill, and cannibalize each other, eat their own eggs and chicks. Our rabbits, though well sheltered, would get the most awful skin diseases and die if they were not separated. They'd kill each other. Our pigs would break out and kill the chickens and eat them from time to time. Even seen them catch and eat snakes, and they fought with each other, making ungodly screams at times. I've seen our goats get sick and die, and squeal out a horrific death rattle that sounded like a human child screaming. Then, drop dead. Goats and cows delivering babies in the night. We would go out there and find them the next day, with the baby stuck in the belly, only being had out, dead, with maggots and fire ants in its eyes and mouth. We would have to put them down. Our horses often got sick and died. One of them got caught up in the fencing in a horrific way one night and was technically strangled to death, tongue hanging out with horrific glazed over eyes. It was a nightmare to say the least, which I endured till I was 20. Those years were so long and horrible, it felt like I was stuck there for 30 years. When my mother came down after a couple of years, nothing really changed. The old man had pretty much gone dark side, and they argued all the time. One time, he broke my dog's jaw with a hammer and took him for a ride. Another time, he killed my pet pig, who was supposed to be kept alive for breeding, and forced me to eat the ribs he cooked from him. Of course, I witnessed countless shootings of animals, things that had to go into the freezer, and I was force initiated into killing also. To make a man out of me, he said. But even though I did that kind of dirty work, I never really enjoyed doing it like he did. There was something in me that loved life and respected it still. I just learned to shut off my emotions and do as I was ordered when I had to. One time, I had dreamed one of the pigs got loose, and my dad shot at it wildly in the woods, not being able to catch it, and something moved me to jump behind the chicken coop, and the buckshot hit the metal siding, protecting me from being shot. Well, guess what? A week later, it happened, just as I had dreamed. The ungodly scream of that pig, though, when he finally shot it. The sound went through me like razor blades. Another time, my father's dog got loose and slaughtered my mother's prized white ducks, and she shot him. He was still alive, but she said she would not go closer to him. She feared getting bit, so I had to finish the job. My dad came home, and all hell broke loose, to say the least. He went out and shot up the backyard. Later at night, I woke up to an AK-47 to my head while in bed. He threatened to kill me and kill my mother and kill himself. I told him, "Dad, you can't do that. God will not let you do that. Please, go back to your room." My parents slept in separate rooms at this point, and he gradually lowered the weapon, going back to his room. Eventually, things simmered down, but I can't count the times I got senseless beatings. Even my mother went dark side one day and beat me with the broomstick until I vomited and said she should have gotten an abortion. Her face looked distorted, and I knew that wasn't really her, deep down in my heart. I knew I was her favorite. Over the years, the old man would go off on the handle over little to nothing. I got the belt. I got fist to cuffs. Bullets shot over my head. I got a 2x4 one time in my face and almost lost my front teeth, a shovel in the back of the head, and the most unique incident where he blowtorched my face for a couple of seconds while we were working on his tractor trailer. I had to scissor off my eyelashes in order to see they had melted shut. It actually took a lot of years to pass for me to look back on that incident and actually laugh. I caught hell about that one at school, let me tell you. I mean, for weeks, walking around with no eyelashes and shaved eyebrows. The old man began to reek of sulfur, I kid you not. And a few times, I saw his eyes go black and his face shift. I even attempted suicide at 16, but God saved me out of that one. I should be dead, but it wasn't my time to go, and I survived. I won't say what I did. I don't want anybody else trying to do it. The year I got baptized, and even though I often felt numb and dead inside, because of all the abuse that I felt, an inner glow deep inside knowing that I was loved by something much greater than myself. That same thing was looking out for me, protecting me. But I must admit, before and up to the suicide attempt, I always felt this thick, oppressive cloud over and around me on that accursed land. There was great evil there, and I felt it all the time. But after my baptism, it wasn't too bad, and it was not felt when I was off the property. So I just learned to cope. Learned not to love or have pets since I had lost so many at that point. When we came there, my beloved black terrier mix, who had survived just fine in New York for 12 plus years, died as soon as we moved down there. My father found him in a ditch near our property, contorted with his tongue nearly bitten off. A snake killed him, most likely. My beautiful Belgian shepherd got heartworm and died. I told my parents he was fainting often, but they did nothing. And by the time they tried, because he would not get up one day, it was too late, and he had to be put down. Now when I think about it back then, the evidence shows we were not the only ones suffering in that area. Lots of people had animal problems too. There was rampant drug use, suicides swept under the carpet and ignored. Lots of strange illnesses like lupus, cancer, leukemia, all kinds of mental illness too. Even a woman at church had this strange hardening of the skin disease. My friend from school, who was older than me, died of leukemia at 23 years of age, and there were many others. Okay, now I will try and get into an explanation. All the years I was down there, I heard quite often that the area was hexed by Native Americans who had survived the wars against them in that land. According to history, real history, President Jackson ignored Congress during his time as commander-in-chief and did not want to give Florida to the native peoples. Congress felt the military had driven most of them so far south through warfare that they should be left alone. But Jackson refused and led the military down here to make war, and was successful, sending countless thousands, perhaps in the millions to their deaths, on the very legendary Trail of Tears. Also, historical accounts going back to the Civil War show that there was much fighting and bloodshed in this very area. Florida was the last state to hold out against rejoining the Union, and fought long after General Lee had already conceded the war. More proof of this is from my sister. I'll call her Tina, and her husband Carl. She has 2 kids, and Carl was their stepdad. They moved down here after I had left, and went back to New York, and eventually, I did a short stint in the military. The old man, reeking something terrible of sulfur or rotten eggs, I might add that day, and I had a very explosive final argument, and I drove my motorcycle straight up here, and stayed with one of my sisters. I did not come back. It was hell from Virginia on up, because it was raining chilly October rain. I had a full-face black helmet, a cheap waterproof hunting jacket, and pants, but the gloves and sneakers were not waterproof. I could barely feel my hands and feet after that, but they went back to normal after I made it up. Left with the clothes on my back and my last paycheck from my crappy temp job. Tina, after being down here, had nothing but trouble. Pets she had owned for years, dying left and right, disappearing, being found hung in a tree by vines or by their collars. Cats, dogs, rabbits, birds, turtles, fish, you name it. Or disease, and even one dog died of diabetes. One time, she found a big black rat snake in her birdcage that had consumed most of her pet finches, right inside of her house. One night, she also saw a shadow being gliding across the ceiling of her bed, and it smiled at her with serrated teeth and what looked like glowing red cat-slitted eyes. Now, here's the kicker. One particular night, she woke up to a presence in her room. She could see clearly because of her nightlight. She saw a fully dressed in blue Union soldier at attention near her bed holding a rifle. He told her clearly, "I'm here to protect you, ma'am. Everything is okay. You can go back to sleep." She turned away, hiding under her blanket, and went back to sleep eventually. While there on the land, though, her health began to go downhill. My brother-in-law got diabetes too. My parents fought with her often, and my dad even physically assaulted her one night over a very big misunderstanding, beating her like a child, a grown woman in her late 30s. Eventually, my mother and father divorced. He cheated on her with a woman later diagnosed with AIDS, and she had had enough. She called me up to the army crying and told me what had happened and how she had to get tested and hoped and prayed everything would go well. I could not keep my head straight after I found out. I got into fights. I almost became a victim of Full Metal Jacket blanket party, which I had witnessed a Texan go through, who, amazingly, looked just like Private Pyle, aka Lawrence in the film. I was doing well, scoring well in the points, until a freak incident happened with a grenade blowing up a few feet away from me, and another bad incident on the rocket launcher range caused me to develop really bad PTSD. Believe it or not, I thought it was just severe anxiety or anxiety attacks at the time, not being properly diagnosed or seen by a doctor. I was well into my 40s, and after scanning the net, to finally realize I had all the textbook symptoms. After what I had already been through in my life, it didn't take much more to kind of send me over the edge. I began drinking and smoking a lot, leaving the base without permission, and eventually met with Jag and opted to get out early. A good thing too, or else my mother would be dead. I got home in time to help my father move to a new property, and during a bad argument with my mother, I saw the blood in his eyes when he went for his loaded gun, threatening to blow her head off. I got my mother off the property before he came back with a loaded .38 pistol. Once I got her down the road in her pickup, she left. I went back to him to talk him down. It took an hour or so, but he did calm down, and I finished moving him. He finally, after many years, opened up to me and admitted that he had something like a serpent coiled up inside of him, and the drugs and alcohol helped keep it from springing up into his head and taking over. In that state, he said that he could see what he was doing, but like on autopilot, in a nightmare that he could not stop. Time passed, and I heard my mom get threatening phone calls. He planned to hire somebody to kill her for taking his land. So, for the very first time in my life, I rose up against him, went to his house, and told him if he ever harmed my mother, I would kill him. He had never seen me like that before, and I actually saw fear in his eyes. He backed down, and I never heard any more threats and harassment from him after that. He died, a foul-smelling man who could barely avoid urinating on himself at night at the age of 66 on February 6th in the year 2006. Sad to say, the truth is, I was relieved. It was over. I didn't have to worry anymore. That was an evil put to rest. Or so I thought. After he died, my brother-in-law found him. It had only been 3 days, but in the Florida heat, it was not a pretty sight. Carl was told to go check on him due to Tina's intuition, and when my father would not answer the door, he broke in, headed to his room. When Carl pulled back the covers, the old man's face peeled off, being stuck to the blanket. His body bloated, discolored, and maggots were spilling out all over the bed. He ran outside, vomiting all over the ground. Eventually, my family all met for his funeral, and he was cremated and placed in a wall at a military burial site, since he had served in the military before he married my mother. Not too long after, Tina and Carl began to argue, nearly constantly. I had become a truck driver by this time, had a short marriage and divorce, moved into a summer home in Summerfield, but would visit from time to time. One time, I went to talk to Carl to reason with him, and when I got out of my car to go knock on their door, something struck me hard, right in the sweet spot. If you remember from the Ouija board incident, I almost had broken my back. After many years of hard labor on the property and unloading trucks, that was my weak spot, my lower spine. After I got hit, I felt electricity go through my chest and down through my legs into my knees. I grabbed the car handle to keep from falling face first into the dirt. After looking behind me, I saw nothing. I said a quick prayer, and after 5 minutes or so, I was able to get up and walk, and the pain subsided. I was going to leave, but my heart would not allow it. I felt it was my duty to try and talk sense into Carl for my sister. I willed myself to go knock on the door. Carl answered the door. He stuck his face in my face and began laughing with ink-black eyes and began babbling in some unknown language. After his insane laughter and apparently mocking me, he turns around, went into the kitchen, and got a soft drink out of the fridge. I said, "Carl, are you okay?" And he looks at me like nothing ever happened and just says, "Hey bro, what time you get here?" We didn't talk long after that. Safe to say, I skedaddled real quick and left and did not come back for a long time. When I did years later, I noticed his room smelled like my father's old room, and he lined up his personal items and knickknacks, cigarettes, lighter, and change on his dresser and night table, just like my old man used to. Freaky, to say the least. One time, he had fought with my sister, and she said his eyes went completely black during the argument. That situation was heavy, but seemed to lighten up over time when she began attending a church she liked regularly. Eventually, I went through my haunting in Summerfield experience and my nightmare in Louisville experience, which I have nicknamed affectionately Luciferville, but those are other stories. In spite of the nickname, I loved it up there, and there are many friendly, warm, and kind people out in Kentucky, and in that quaint little endearing city. I actually think often about moving back there someday, if circumstances allow it. That bad experience there, in truth, was focused around my fiancée, the people she associated with, especially on social media, and her neighborhood, not the whole city. Of course, I told you about the Facebook werewolf experience, but I have more to tell about my time there sometime in the future. The story of the accursed land is not quite done. After years with my fiancée, we separated, and even though I have visited her time to time, I eventually ended up in Georgia. I liked the people, but driving there was hell, especially going through the bumper-to-bumper traffic on the I-285 loop every single day in Atlanta. Things did not work out, so I talked to my mom and moved back down to Florida. I would think that after all these years, Something had changed, or so I thought. I came back down, slept in my mother's guest bedroom, which was my old childhood room. My white Pomeranian, a gift from my sister in Georgia, stayed in a cage with my mother's dogs in the kitchen. For a couple of weeks, there weren't any problems, but the house had a dark feel to it. One night, I woke up feeling a lot of anxiety. I heard movement in the dark. I could see, though, because the moonlight coming into the room through the window. And I kid you not, the closet door opened up very slowly, making creaking sounds. Once it was open, I heard footsteps. It sounded bipedal, about the weight and size of, say, a 6-year-old kid, but I couldn't see anything. I was on the bottom mattress of the wooden bunk bed, set up with stairs to the top bunk. I heard this thing make footsteps and go up the stairs to the top bunk. It sat down and started squeaking the bed, like a little child would when they are swinging their legs to bounce their bottom up and down when they are restless. I was terrified. I could hear this thing, but couldn't see it. I prayed and prayed for it to go away, and it eventually, after 10 or so minutes, the activity did stop around dawn, and I was finally able to drift off to sleep. I woke up wishing I had dreamed it all, but I knew well that I had not. This experience of night terror happened 2 more times, 3 times in all. I had had it. I knew how my mother's mentality was, and didn't even try to bother saying anything to her about it. I went that week, signed up for some debt at a camper home dealership, got a used camper and dropped it about 100 feet near her house with my pickup truck and moved out. I eventually found a local trucking job driving rock trucks and figured I'd be all right. Well, I would not be all right. Not long after my mother called me at work one day, my beloved white Pomeranian, named Benjamin, died suddenly. I would leave him with my mother when I went to work. One day, he practically exploded with blood. My mother and her friend rushed him to the emergency vet hospital, but he didn't make it. The veterinarian even had no clue as to what killed him. He was perfectly healthy and happy up until that moment. My mother said that she could not believe so much blood poured out of one little dog's mouth and nose. Everybody loved Benji. He was the only dog that I had after many years that touched my heart. And now he was gone. 4 years old, and just gone. I was heartbroken after that. He was special, and everybody knew it. I called him Mr. Happy Face because he had this permanent smile like Mickey Mouse, red tongue and all, and the special gift to pick up anybody's heart in the worst of times. There were strange signs too before he died. Like, I dreamed he died beforehand, but I didn't believe it, and blew the dream off. Then, a coworker of mine named Benjamin, who looked like death warmed over, like one of those pale corpses-looking people on drugs, used to accost me often to talk about nonsensical things for no reason, asking silly, pointless questions he should have known the answers to concerning our job tasks. That suspected meth head with rotting teeth only drove with the company a few months and left before my dog died, and I ended up driving his truck, which was a filthy mess that I had to clean up. I never saw him again, not even on the road. As time went by, I was talking to my sister Tina one day, and I found out that my sister Sarah and her husband, on a visit at my mom's house one night, saw my father's ghost in the middle of the hallway one night. They freaked out and booked it to a motel. Another time, my nephew from Georgia was staying in the guest bedroom and was creeped out by hearing small footsteps and giggling going up and down the hallway one night while in bed. Plus, he said that her little clown doll collection and owl pictures in the room creeped him out. I definitely agree. Eventually, my mother opened up to me, and often, she felt something brushing her leg at times, and some nights, she felt some big man sit down on the side of her bed. She felt it was my father. One time, She yelled and commanded what she thought was my father by his first name to leave and don't come back, and the activity stopped. After many years of study, in my opinion, that was not him, just the entity that was parasitically using him, called a familiar spirit. One night, I woke up to hear a bipedal thing about the size of a child run across my camper roof and leap off of it. It sounded like it was messing with my air conditioner. The AC never ran right after that. It rattled and it was hard to sleep with it on, and it kept having black mold breakouts in it. I began repeatedly having mold breakouts all over my camper too, got quite sick and even missed 2 weeks of work. Eventually, the unit blew entirely, and so I bought a new one. Often, at about the witching hour, I would get knocks on my door. 3 knocks. But every time I turned on the lights and answered, there was nobody there. One time, I was on the phone discussing spiritual warfare with my fiancé when something big banged into my window and began howling and screaming. It sounded like a cross between a child and a baboon. It was unholy. Never heard anything like that before in my life. I was terrified, and I did not open the blinds to see what it was. But later on, after some walks on the property, I heard some similar sounds and saw a huge, intimidatingly large type of owl, which had taken up residency in one of our trees. This owl had ink-black eyes and harassed me often at dusk and at around 3 a.m., the so-called witching hour, with its god-awful voice. Lots of harassment from black crows, too. One night, I woke up to see a wraith at the foot of my bed. I freak out, start fly-kicking at it with my right leg, and yelling, and it vanished. I was covered with sweat, and stayed up until the sun came up. It looked like a grim reaper with no sickle. Numerous times the window was banged in the middle of the night, waking me up. One morning, the crack of dawn, I awoke to my camper being violently shook back and forth like a ship at sea. When it stopped, I looked out the window to see a pack of pigs running away. One of them, just one, stopped and looked back at me directly in the eyes and was smirking at me. My neighbor's pigs had broken out of their pen, but there was no reason for them to surround the camper like that, since there was no food for them, or even roots. Just dirt under the camper. It reminded me of the account of Christ casting legion into the pigs. Extremely creepy and shocking, to say the least. Finally, after another sickness, I decided to do a house blessing, but I knew it was risky since, in truth, the entire land needed cleansing, and many cursed objects should have been removed from the homes, which were many, since my mother rented several single wides at the time, and my sister, cousin, and aunt had double-wide homes on the land too. It should have been done with a family group prayer together as a team, but I know they wouldn't be of much help, and were far too attached to their household idols to do a proper cleansing. It was dangerous because I could really anger these entities or imps, whatever you want to call them. I opted to do it, and did a prayer blessing over my camper, blessed olive oil in prayer, and anointed the roof and 4 walls and windows and doors. The activity against me began to die down, but eventually cranked back up in the form of nightmares. 2 years of that went by. Nightmares about fighting bigoted gangs of men who wanted to hang me, lynch me, or gangs of robbers dressed in black. Even gangs of women who resembled prostitutes, trying to assault me and violate me. I even had a realistic nightmare about these reptile frog humanoid type creatures attacking me. And always, I would wake up feeling like hammered, and like somebody beat me up from the inside out. Eventually, I began anointing my head with blessed olive oil before I slept. I woke the next day, nightmare-free, but my forehead had this burning sensation. I think something tried very hard to penetrate my mind, but the oil kept it out. The nightmares had stopped after I began doing that. So far, that is the situation at present. It's been hell down here, and if the opportunity arises, I will try and leave. Currently, I'm trapped in this accursed place because of the hell I've been through in 2020, and not due to the virus. I've had a lot of bad luck. I was also terrorized by the black triangle UFO chasing me in the woods in one of the last stories, and had severe back injury again, and now I've been out of work for over a year. I got a lawyer to get me lawyer's comp settlement for my job and would have been barely surviving since and have had to apply for welfare. This last injury has been very bad, and I don't think I will ever work again. Other debilitating health problems have now popped up. Pain, along with some tumors, severe chronic fatigue and shortness of breath. So I don't know where this is going quite yet. Suicide has often crossed my mind, but I know better than that after what happened when I was 16. I know this is long, but I had to tell all my experiences of this land, and there is no easy way to do it except tell all that I can remember.